Hey everyone, MeltingMan234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff stranded on the island of Forgotten Christmas Specials, right next to the island of Misfit Toys. A Christmas Carol, a timeless tale about an old man who hates Christmas, but the spirits of time soon help change his mind on what Christmas really is. Since Charles Dickens created the novel, there has been many film adaptations over the years. Whether they be wonderful or crappy, they still follow the story well. There have been many parodies and references in many different medias, and practically everyone has thrown in their version of A Christmas Carol. The Muppets did it, Looney Tunes did it, the Smurfs did it, Disney has done it at least 3 times. Heck, even I did my version of the tale in my old Action Mario and Luigi plush series.
This is your Christmas future. Ebenezer Scrooge? Oops, wrong future.
Despite how there are so many film adaptations of A Christmas Carol that most people know about, and they always have to show most of them on TV every year in December, I went digging around to find some of the more lesser-known film adaptations that would work on Forgotten Media, and I've managed to find a few. So it's time to follow the path of the ghost of Christmas past to discover some old films that are over 100 years old. First up is Scrooge, or Marley's Ghost, a British silent film directed by Walter R. Booth, and was released on November of 1901. This film is known as the first film adaptation of A Christmas Carol, and it dates way back to the early 1900s, back in the old days of silent black and white movies. The film centers on Scrooge, the old miserly man who doesn't give a damn about Christmas, until he is visited by the ghost of his former partner, Jacob Marley, who helps redeem Scrooge from sharing the same fate as he had. During the years of silent films, they were silent when the finished film came out, obviously. Most theaters would usually have an orchestra or a guy playing an organ to fill in for the music. There's also not that many title cards to display what the characters are saying in this film, so you really have to use your imagination when the characters start moving their mouths to show that they're talking. One of the things that is different from the novel is that Scrooge doesn't meet the 3 spirits that show him the past, present, and future of Christmas. Instead, Marley does all 3 parts, hence why the alternate title is called Marley's Ghost. For a film made in 1901, you can see the film hasn't aged that well over the years. Most of the sets look like backdrops, and the entire film looks like it was filmed on a theater stage. The special effects aren't anything special with today's standards, but back then they were fascinating, seeing Marley's head on the door, or showing Scrooge his past with the use of a black curtain for a background. The costuming for its time are okay, with the exception of Marley's Ghost, which is pretty lazy. It's just some guy with a white sheet thrown over him. But this film has a special moment, as it was shown at the Sandringham House on December of 1901, as part of a royal command performance by King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra. Yeah, this film was requested by some people in high society to be shown at a big fancy building. So for people that were rich and royal, or managed to get lucky to go inside the building, you pretty much got the best seats in the house. The length of the film is a bit confusing. From what I've dug up, most resources say that the film is either 10 minutes or 6 minutes long, and it all depends on if the film is sped up or not. There are some scenes missing, such as Scrooge viewing the death of Tiny Tim, but at least I can confirm that it's not the length of a feature-length film, because those type of films didn't exist back in the early 1900s. As far as I know, there is no home video release for this film, unless people managed to keep the original film reels that had the film, but other than that, there's always YouTube. So that's Scrooge or Marley's Ghost, an interesting attempt to make a film based off the novel, and it's amazing that this much film footage has managed to survive over the years. About a few years later, there were more early film adaptations of the story, and they actually had the name A Christmas Carol in the title. One was made in 1908, and the other one made in 1910, the same year the first film adaptation of Frankenstein was released. I was going to feature both films in this episode, but things got a bit confusing. I was able to do a decent amount of research on the 1910 version. As for the 1908 version, not so much. Most resources that talk about the film don't have much to say, or confuse the film to be the 1910 version. All I can find for concrete evidence of the 1908 film is that it was made by a company called S&A Studios, and a man by the name of Tom Ricketts played the role of Scrooge. So who knows if this film still exists, or if it's been declared as a lost film. It might as well share the same fate as The Right to Be Happy, a full-length film adaptation of A Christmas Carol made in 1916, that is also considered to be a lost film. So with that out of the way, let's focus on the 1910 version that was made by the Edison Studios. Scrooge is an asshole, he gets haunted by ghosts, and he later sees the error of his ways. Same basic story. One of the interesting things about this adaptation is when Scrooge's nephew visits him. In most versions, it's just himself, but in this one, it's himself and his friends that visit him. Haven't really seen anything like that before. Marley is better designed this time, although he wears a chain around his waist instead of being covered in chains. And I'll tell you, it's a lot better than the 1901 version. The ghosts that visit Scrooge are actually in this version, and they're all played by the same actor. The acting is more fine-tuned in this version, where the actors become the characters in the film, with some quirky moments here and there. Like near the end of the film when Scrooge offers Bob Cratchit to raise his salary, Bob thinks he's crazy and he's about ready to clobber him with a shovel. That's another thing with these silent black and white films. The actors can sometimes go over the top with their acting and actions, kind of like Buster Keaton films. If the music doesn't keep the audience going, then the acting will. And instead of cutting the scenes of Scrooge viewing these images in the location, they are actually shown to him in his bedroom the whole time, so there's more special effects in this version of Scrooge seeing his past, present, and future. The film follows the novel very well, even the brief scene with misery and want is shown in the film, along with a few other things. So that's the 1910 version, a decent film that has managed to survive over the years. Now I know that there are other film adaptations of A Christmas Carol during that time period, but those two are the only ones I've managed to find so far. So, depending on which silent black and white version is the best film adaptation of A Christmas Carol, I'll have to say the 1910 one is probably the best one. The 1901 version was more of an experiment of making a film version of the novel, and it shows. It was quite the challenge, and although it might have been well received back then, it really doesn't hold up with today's standards. The 1910 version refines some of these problems, better acting, better scenery, and so on. So if you're in the mood of watching old black and white silent films this holiday season, or if you want to watch a different version of A Christmas Carol, then I say give the 1910 version a watch. You can easily find it on YouTube as there is no home video release for this film, or at least as far as I know. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.